What countries do you think are on their way to a total collapse or at least go downhill in 2023? In this video, I'm going to tell you which ones I think are going downhill and why. This is the third video in our downhill series. We've already done states and cities in the US, so before we start looking at who's going to be doing better, we have to finish up with who's going downhill. Every country, large or small, city, town, everyone took a hit the last few years because of the pandemic. Some, in my opinion, have set themselves up for success post-COVID. Others, not so much. Today we're looking at those countries that fall into the not so much category. This video is my opinion. It is based on information that I've taken in over the last year or two. And it's based on things that I've seen, and it's not based on any one stat or one figure. There's a lot of things that go into this. Are these countries 100% bad? No, not really. Will they struggle in the next year and probably beyond? I think so. If you think a country shouldn't be on this list or you think one should have been on this list, I would love to hear about it in the comment section below. These are just my opinions and why. Yours, I'm sure, are just as valid. Get it? Got it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, El Salvador. El Salvador is a Central American country with about 6.8 million residents. It has Honduras to the east, the Pacific Ocean to the west, and Guatemala to the north. El Salvador is a beautiful country with incredible landscapes and great people. They just have made some bad decisions and had some bad things happen there. There's a lot of history from the colonial period and before. The colonial period was not great for the indigenous people. They also had a civil war from 1979 to 1992 where they estimate about 75,000 people were killed. That's just an estimate. There are thousands and thousands that are unaccounted for. El Salvador's economy has been hampered multiple times by natural disasters like earthquakes and hurricanes, by government policies, total corruption. You name it, it's worked against the El Salvadorian economy. Just last year, the president, who's a big cryptocurrency enthusiast, he decided to make Bitcoin a legal tender in El Salvador. It's only been a year, but most experts say it's a disaster. A lot of people might think this is great. El Salvador is a cryptocurrency dream. But really, it's like a cautionary tale at this point. Trust has fallen to the point where it really looks like El Salvador in the next few years, especially in the next 6 months, are going to fall on some hard times. Now, like I said, it's only been a year and there still is potential for this to kind of turn around and bring in outside investment. But it's not really showing much sign of that right now. That's why I think they're going downhill in the next year, at least. Now keep in mind, this isn't the worst countries on the planet. These are the ones that I think will go downhill the most over the next year at least. Some countries are so bad they can't go any lower. Number 9, Belarus. Belarus has attached itself to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They're one of the few countries that is backing Russia on this, and they're paying the price. Western sanctions have been hard on Russia, and because of its stance, Belarus is now feeling the effect. This just isn't US sanctions. This is like everyone's sanctions almost. As this war drags on, and if Belarus stays aligned with Russia, it's just going to get worse for the entire country of Belarus. I mean, it's too bad. This is a beautiful country with great people. It's just they're politically aligned in a way that it's really going against what most of the world's doing right now. Number 8, South Africa. South Africa has a lot of problems. One, crime is kind of out of control. South Africa took an exceptionally large hit when it came to the pandemic. COVID-19 wrecked the economy of this country. Now they are recovering a little bit, but poverty and unemployment are still really bad in South Africa. Combine that with the serious drought they're facing right now, it's like a disaster cocktail. And that's why I think South Africa is going to be going downhill in 2023. Number 7, the United States. Yep, I believe we're going downhill. We have been for quite a few years. The pandemic hit the United States just like everyone else, but we had a little bit of an additive, I guess you could say. The facts and conspiracies put Americans at each other's throats over something that we should have all got together to try and defeat. So not only were we fighting a pandemic, we were fighting each other over it. And that, I think, will have lasting effects on the United States. We've got political turmoil, we have inflation problems, we have gas price problems, healthcare problems, supply chain problems, a worker shortage. But really the political turmoil is the biggest thorn in the paw of the United States right now. I'm not saying where you stand is either good or bad, but I mean, we've had The Supreme Court makes some decisions that have been unpopular with half the country. You got that total shit show that's swirling around every aspect of the 2020 election. You know, anytime I see anything on the news about that whole thing, I just remember that show, The Osbournes. Remember that Ozzy Osbourne reality TV show about his family? Well, his son, Jack Osbourne, said something that has always stuck with me. And it's not like I go to Jack Osbourne for wisdom or guidance or anything like that. Actually, he's probably one of the last people this sentence just stuck with me. He said that historically, countries or civilizations don't last that long. And he said he didn't see the United States lasting another 50 years. Sometimes you see things that are going on in Washington, D.C. here in the United States, and you think, yeah, maybe Jack Osbourne's onto something. I hope not. I like my country. Number 6, Pakistan. Pakistan's been in bad shape for some time now. I think it all started when India got nukes some time ago. They decided they need nukes because their neighbor had nukes. Sure, half their people were starving, but they needed nukes. When they first started doing their testing years ago, they had the people in the streets celebrating their new nuclear program. You're looking at these people going, yeah, they were forced to be there. Financially, since the pandemic, Pakistan is doing incredibly bad. Pakistan has already initiated talks with the International Monetary Fund for a bailout package. A Karachi-based newspaper called Dawn, in an editorial, noted that any further delay in the IMF agreement would only cause irreversible damage to the economy of Pakistan, and said their current situation is unsustainable. They're also suffering from fallout from the war in Ukraine. And they just had devastating floods that are sure to create a food crisis. Yeah, I don't see 2023 getting any better for them. Probably 24, 25, 26, if nothing else happens. Number 5, Sri Lanka. You ever heard of Sri Lanka? I have. I used to go to school with some kids from Sri Lanka. Well, now they're like 50, but they were kids when I knew them. So I knew all about the country. A couple of them did speeches in a speech class I had, and it really sounds like a beautiful country. And I got to tell you, they were some of the sweetest people I've ever met. One of their moms, and I'm not even going to attempt to do the accent, but it was just great. She's all, "You're Mr. Briggs. I understand you have quite the funny bone." Of course, I snickered. Sri Lanka's economic crisis that was triggered by a debt default, food, and fuel shortages has led to violence in the streets. They've had quite a few riots, and some bad things are happening there. This has hit the headlines, but several other countries are seeing the same thing, like the one we just talked about, Pakistan, South Africa's in that, Nepal, Ethiopia, Ghana, Peru. They're all facing the same thing. Sri Lanka is in the grip of ballooning debt, trade deficits, and falling foreign exchange reserves. The COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict have pushed debt levels sky high in Sri Lanka and other countries. It's actually quite alarming. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't some kind of coup, the president steps down, or they have an all-out civil war in Sri Lanka soon. Number 4, China. Yes, the economic power of China is not doing great right now. Do I think they're going to collapse? Absolutely not. Do I think they're going to see a couple rough years? I think they are. They've already had to freeze people's funds at different banks to stop the banks from collapsing. The thing is, the economy for China has been incredible over the last few decades, and it's continued to grow. The problem they have now, they're a victim of their own success. Now, I'm not going to get all into it. I will tell you that Stephan, he's a YouTuber, he's gone really in depth on it on a few different videos. I'll link one down below. But I'm in total agreement with him that it's already started to go down and they're already facing financial problems. It's just going to get worse in 2023. Now, he also mentioned how China has been using bots to suppress information from videos like this one. So make sure you like the video, please. Number 3, Ukraine. Unless you've been living off the grid since January of 2022, I'm sure you know that Russia invaded Ukraine about 200 days ago, a little bit over. Russia, of course, thought it was going to be a big walk in the park and they just take the country over. It hasn't turned out that way, and this thing has dragged on, like I said, over 200 days now. There's no end in sight. Ukraine is basically in shambles right now, and the damage that has been done will take decades to repair. Ukraine was in debt before the war to the tune of about $20 billion. That doesn't sound like much to China and the United States. That's big to Ukraine. Now, I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of debt forgiveness and, they're going to put things on hold and aid will come in once this is over. But right now, in the near future, it's not going to get any better. It's affecting other countries in Europe too. Ukraine is among the world's top food producers and exporters and is often described as the breadbasket of Europe. Yeah, do I think Ukraine's gonna go downhill in 2023? Absolutely. Number 2, North Korea. This shouldn't shock anyone. I mean, everybody knows that North Korea is in bad shape. They got serious food shortages. They've got serious economic problems, and they've closed themselves off to the world, just about everyone except for China. And as we've already learned, China's starting to have some problems. And I think what's going to happen to North Korea is sort of what happened to Cuba. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the checks quit coming in the mail. So you have another one of those countries where the people are starving, but they do have nuclear weapons to keep them warm at night. But I see the economic future of North Korea being in step with whatever goes on in China. The difference is, China sees it as a small blip on their economy and it'll recover in a couple years. North Korea is in a much more dire situation. A lot more people are going to die of starvation in that country. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget to hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. We also have a channel called On This Day. There's a link down below. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Russia. Yep, Russia and their war in Ukraine is going to devastate this country for years to come. U.S. intelligence estimates that there is some 15,000 Russian soldiers that have been killed so far in Ukraine, and 3 times that wounded. That is about equal to what the Soviet Union saw during the occupation of Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989. It's a little over 200 days. They've lost what they lost in 10 years. On top of that, the amount of helicopters and tanks and equipment they've lost is just going to hurt their economy. If you watch the news, there's different parts of Russia right now that are calling for Vladimir Putin to resign. So I honestly think in 2023 and probably beyond, that country is going to be in a lot of turmoil, and there's going to be some serious weirdness coming out of there. But you got to hope for the best at this point with them. An unstable Russia is not what we want. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now, this was just my opinion from things I've seen, and I'm sure you guys will have different opinions. Please let me know in the comment section below. All right, everyone, have a great day. Be nice to each other.